Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our presentation through the Colorado Pilots Association. My name is Michael Koselniak. I'm the chairman of the safety committee. Thank you for attending tonight. Tonight we have a very special guest. We have the deputy chief of the Central Region for the National Transportation Safety Board. Her name is Jennifer Rodi. She has been employed with the Ntsb as a field investigator since October 2003 and has been the investigator in charge of numerous regional field and limited investigations during this time. She is currently a senior air safety investigator in the Central Region. To date, she has launched as the investigator in charge of 100 field and major investigations and has served as the investigator in charge of over 500 investigations. In the past, she has served as the investigator in charge of the Frisco, Colorado air methods accident, the investigator in charge of the Agricultural Aviation Special Investigation Report, the Survival Factors Group chairman for the Lubbock, Texas Empire Airlines accident, and has participated in other major investigations, public hearings, special investigation reports, and board meetings conducted by the Ntsb. Before her employment with the Ntsb, Jennifer was employed as a flight instructor in Part 61 and Part 141 flight schools. She also worked as a photo recon pilot and performed aerial surveys of oil and gas lines. She currently holds a commercial pilot certificate with single, multi, and instrument ratings. In addition, she is a certified flight and ground instructor with single, multi, and instrument privileges for flight instruction and advanced and instrument privileges for ground instructions. She holds a bachelor's of science in professional aeronautics and a master's of science in aeronautical science, both from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, and a doctorate of philosophy in industrial and organizational psychology from Capella University. In her free time, she enjoys gardening, hiking, and playing Legos with her son. Welcome, Jennifer. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you. It's an honor and a privilege to be here tonight. I'm going to, I like to have kind of a free forum for the presentation as I speak through here. It's easier to ask a question when we're in a specific area as opposed to having to go back 20 or 60 slides during the presentation. So if you have a question, please just speak up, or if you raise your hand. I think I can see the chat, so I can try and monitor the chat as well. But Mike and Martin, if you guys could help me out with that, I would definitely appreciate it. I'll speak on a couple of different topics this evening. We'll talk about who the Ntsb is. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about who the Ntsb is and what our authority is. We'll cover the definitions that give us our authority within aviation. There'll be a little bit of a halfway quiz there, so please do pay attention. We'll talk about the different types of investigations that we conduct, our investigative process, our pillars of responsibility, and then if there's time, I do tend to go on ad nauseum and be a little bit flowery in my conversation. So if there's time at the end, we'll do a quick case study on an investigation that I did a few years ago. So we'll talk to begin with, who is the Ntsb and what is our authority? So the Ntsb is an independent federal agency. What does that mean? Independent, meaning that we report directly to Congress and the President of the United States. We are not a part of the Department of Transportation. And in this position, with this independent authority, we're able to conduct investigations without influence or bias from other federal agencies or other entities. Our mission is multifold. We're tasked with the responsibility of investigating transportation accidents, making recommendations to prevent future similar accidents, conducting special studies and investigations based on the trends that we observe within the different modes of transportation. And then we also coordinate resources to assist victims and their families following an accident. This was something that was added to our authority about 30 years after we first received our authority for investigating transportation accidents. The last responsibility that we have that's not on this slide, but is important to mention, is our administrative law judges, who are tasked with the responsibility of being the independent jurists, if you will, for hearing cases between the FAA and pilots, or the Department of Transportation and different mariners, or those who pilot ships. So as I mentioned, the Ntsb is separate from the Department of Transportation, separate from the FAA. While the FAA does participate in our investigations, we do not report to the Federal Aviation Administration, nor do they report to us. Again, we report directly to Congress and the President of the United States, and that's where we have our authority to conduct investigations. Unlike the FAA, we do not have regulatory authority. So during the course of an investigation, I have authority to view records, conduct interviews, look at wreckage, examine wreckage, but I do not have the authority to take a pilot certificate away from them, an operator certificate away from them, or levy any sort of fines against a pilot or an operator for anything that we find during the course of our investigation. I like this in that when I sit down and talk to a pilot, they don't have to worry about what they're sharing with me with regards to the accident, because it can't be used against them, if that makes sense. We do have 5 board members within the Ntsb. They're at the head of our agency, and these individuals are all politically appointed. They're nominated for 5-year terms by the president and then confirmed by the Senate. So similar to other heads of different agencies within the federal government. We do have a chair who serves a 2-year term and a vice chair who serves a 2-year term. We currently have 4 board members and are awaiting the appointment of a 5th board member. Most recently, Robert Sumwalt, who had served with the agency for many, many years, and most recently as our chair. He retired last summer and was replaced by Jennifer Homendy, who is currently our chair. So if you're in the market for a job and you feel that you have the credentials to sit in our board, I certainly encourage you to take a look and do apply for that position. So the Ntsb does not investigate just aviation accidents. We investigate all modes of transportation. So that includes highway accidents, boat accidents, railroad, pipeline, and hazardous materials. The difference between aviation and the other modes is we're required by federal statute to investigate all aviation accidents, but only limited other high-profile accidents in the other modes of transportation. Within the Office of Aviation Safety, and this is kind of an interesting tidbit, and I'll frame it for you in a minute here. We have about 120 employees for the entire agency responsible for all aspects of investigating aviation accidents. So these 120 employees, that includes about 85 investigators, 40 of which are headquarters specialists. They specialize in engines, structures, weather, air traffic control, different subject matter experts, if you will. And we have about 45 regional investigators, investigators such as myself, that are positioned throughout the United States and responsible for investigating mostly general aviation type accidents. So I'm going to frame this for you. We're responsible for conducting all of the investigations throughout the United States in a year. We number about the same amount that you would find within an FAA FSDO, one FAA FSDO. So for example, the Denver office is quite a large FAA FSDO office. Our entire agency, the budget that we receive could fund the Federal Aviation Administration or the FBI for about 15 minutes. So in the grand scheme of things, when it comes to public federal budget, public funds, we're a very, very small agency, and they consider us a rounding error. when it comes to the federal budget, what the Congress and the Senate vote on an annual basis so that we can all do our jobs. So again, within aviation, we have a statutory authority to investigate every aviation accident that involves a U.S. aircraft other than those that are operated by the armed services or the CIA and any sort of intelligence agency. For very good reasons, we don't need to get involved with those accidents when they do take place. The armed forces provide their own expertise when it comes to investigating those accidents. So with this authority, again, as I mentioned previously, this gives us access to look at the wreckage, secure the wreckage, examine the wreckage where applicable, and then obtain information through other records, maintenance records, pilot records, employment records, and then through interviews with different people who might be involved in any aspect of the operation of that aircraft or that accident. Any questions before I move on to definitions? Excellent. I'm not seeing anything. So here's where you need to keep your pencils handy and pay attention, because there will be a quiz coming up here in just a few minutes. We're going to talk accident definition. So what is it that makes it an accident? When an airplane comes down hard or a helicopter runs into a tree, what makes that an accident? So to begin with, the damage or the injury has to be a result of the operation of the aircraft with the intention of flight. And that has to result in death or serious injury for the occupants of the aircraft or substantial damage for the airframe that we're talking about. So what is serious injury? We have a definition for serious injury. Serious injury is an injury that results in hospitalization for more than 48 hours, fractures of any bones, and you'll see I have a little asterisk next to that. So if you break your nose, your fingers, or your toes, it's gonna hurt, but we're not going to classify it as an accident just based on that particular bone being broken. If you have hemorrhages, nerve, muscle, or tendon damage, so if you're in a hot air balloon and the hot air balloon tips over and you tear your ACL, it's going to be classified as an accident. If you have internal organ damage, we're going to classify it as an accident. An example of that would be a laceration of your liver because you're not wearing your seatbelt properly. That's why the flight attendants ask you to wear your seatbelt low and tight across your lap, because if you wear it around your belly and you're involved in a collision at up to 35 miles an hour, you could lacerate your liver and bleed to death before you knew that anything was wrong with you. So that location of your seatbelt is extremely important. And lastly, second or third degree burns across at least 5% of your body. So if you have any of these injuries that are a result of the operation of an airplane or an aircraft with the intention of flight, we would classify that as an accident. Substantial damage. So we've talked about the human aspect of it. When it comes to the airframe, substantial damage is damage or failure that structurally or affects the structural strength, performance, flight characteristics of the airplane, and will require major repair of that particular component. So substantial damage is not an engine failure. If you lose your engine, if your engine quits, if your engine stops producing power, you conduct an uneventful forced landing to a field, there's no other damage to your airplane, we're going to congratulate you for doing a very good job maintaining control of that airplane, and we're not going to otherwise be involved in that investigation, just if you have an engine failure. If you strike your prop, you come in a little bit too low, nose low, you strike your prop on the runway, that's the only damage that you have to the airframe. Again, we're not going to conduct an investigation. It does affect the flight characteristics and performance of your airplane, but if we did nothing but prop strikes, that's all we would do is nothing but prop strikes. There's a lot of prop strikes out there. So we do not do propeller strikes for accident investigations. Landing gear damage, wheels, brake damage, if it's just limited to that area, that component, we're not going to do an investigation. bent fairings or cowlings, not going to do an accident investigation, and wingtip damage. You know, the very end of your, for example, 172, it's all plastic. There's absolutely no structure in there. It's going to cost you a lot of money to break that and have to replace that with Textron Aviation, but that does not qualify as substantial damage. So we will not be doing an accident investigation there. So if it's not clear whether or not it's substantial damage, that's where the duty officer gets involved. We're going to work with the FAA. We're going to look at a lot of pictures of the area that we're concerned about. We're going to liaise with our structures engineer here at the Ntsb to make that determination as to whether something fits the definition of substantial damage or whether it is not substantial damage, which would move it into an incident classification. And we don't do all incident investigations. This would be any other event other than an accident, again, due to the operation of the airplane, and that could affect safety of operations. So again, we don't do a ton of incident investigations. We only conduct those where we really have a trend that we're seeing with a certain failure of a component, and we believe that we need to take a closer look to understand this failure and take steps to preclude similar future failures that could possibly result in an accident or a loss of life. So again, an accident is an operation of the aircraft with the intention of flight that results in death or serious injury or substantial damage. So any questions?
This is Michael. I have a question. I just watched YouTube here a couple of days ago where it was a Cessna 206 in Oregon, and the young man did a dead stick landing into an airfield, landed successfully, everything was fine, but he had a catastrophic engine failure. I mean, the jugs on both sides towards the frame, towards the compartment, so to speak. I mean, they just let loose and it just split the engine in half, basically. Would that would not be considered?
So we'd want to ask a few more questions. That's a great question. When you have a catastrophic engine failure like that, we're certainly going to want to understand a little bit more. That would meet our definition of a reportable occurrence. And so we would want to have a conversation. I would want to understand how much that airplane shook during that catastrophic engine failure. So was it instantaneous and it stopped and the prop stopped and he just dead sticked it in? Or did that airplane vibrate and shake itself significantly as those cylinders are coming off and it's starting to fail, if you will? If you have that kind of shaking and jostling with that engine's still wanting to do its job, you're going to bend your engine mounts. And if those engine mounts are bent, that's considered structure. And so we would classify it as substantial damage. We would cause that an accident. And then our investigation would focus in on that engine failure. Why did that engine fail? And what can we do to prevent future similar accidents? So it's not clear cut in that, oh, yep, you've got the gaping holes in your engine, we're going to do an investigation. I'm going to seg over related but not related to 121 operations. And let's say that you're flying a Boeing 747 over Denver, Colorado, and you have a catastrophic engine failure of that 747 and that rains parts all over Broomfield, Colorado. Are we going to do an investigation? So it's going to depend on where that catastrophic failure took place and what kind of damage resulted. Those large transport category airplanes have what they call a Kevlar strap that goes around the nacelle for those turbine engines. And when those blades fail and they come out, that Kevlar strap's job is to catch those fan blades and those components as they come flying out of the engine. And if that Kevlar strap does its job, then we're going to downgrade it. We're probably still going to do an investigation because we want to understand why these transport category engines are having problems. We have a greater risk there. But if that Kevlar strap does not do its job, then it can come out. That's considered structure. It can penetrate the fuselage and cause damage to the fuselage that would also classify as substantial damage. So it's not really a one size fits all response, if that makes sense. So we're going to want to ask more questions and understand a little bit more of the circumstances. Does that help?
Yep, yep. Another question I have, you're with the central region, so I assume there's an east region, there's a west region. I know there's an Alaskan. Is there a Hawaiian?
So Hawaii is covered by Alaska right now. It's actually quicker for our Alaska team to get down to Hawaii than it would be for our West Coast team to try to get to Hawaii. But it'll depend on what their staffing situation is. They have 3 investigators in the Anchorage office, so that somebody's on call, somebody's launched, and somebody's taken the week off. So it kind of depends on their situation as to where we would support that accident from elsewhere in the country.
Yeah, I'm kind of shocked when you're, you know, when you hear the NTSB, you know, they're so critical and crucial to what we do as or you do as an organization, and you only have 120 employees. I'm shocked. I'm really taken aback with that.
Yeah, it's a small number. We try to get a big bang for the taxpayers' dollar. Do what we can with what little we have. Absolutely.
Do we have a question?
Mike, I had a question too. Or Brian.
Go for it. Nope, go for it.
Either Martin Brophy, you can go. My question was related to the staffing numbers, because I've been reading a book, The Killing Zone, that has a lot of NTSB case results and NASA reports as well. But at least in one point, the author, who's an experienced CFI, CFII, talks about being deputized to do the analysis for the NTSB. I mean, how often do you do something like that? And what's the criteria for doing it? Just lack of staff? Or?
So I would say that happens very, very rarely to be deputized by the NTSB. A little bit later in my presentation, I'm going to get into what we call the party system, and I'll explain that a little bit more. I would say we would be more likely to deputize a Federal Aviation Administration inspector to be our eyes and ears on an accident scene, a non-fatal accident, versus deputizing some random CFI to do an analysis for us or an investigation for us. Our analysis is 100% a board report. That's not something that we give out to any other independent party, as with our probable cause. So I'd like to talk to the CFI and understand a little bit more their thought process and their perception and what their experience was.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have another question from the chat. Is there a dollar amount of damage that triggers the determination of accident, a metric for substantial damage, excluding those items you mentioned?
Yeah, great question. And that's something that gets confused a little bit, because we do have reportable occurrences. And so reportable occurrences, there's about a dozen different ones, but one of them is damage that exceeds the dollar amount of $25,000. And so if you're taxiing your Southwest Airlines airplane along the tarmac at Denver International Airport, and you run your leading edge of your wing into the light pole at DIA, and you knock that light pole over, believe it or not, it's going to cost about $30,000 to fix that light pole and put it back up. So that right there makes it a reportable occurrence. But the damage to the leading edge of the airplane, the 737, was not substantial damage. So it didn't meet our definition of an accident. So that's a long way to say that it makes it a reportable occurrence, but it doesn't automatically make it an accident. And we're looking at the dollar amount of damage done to other structures, not the dollar amount of damage done to the airplane. So does that help?
Do you know how long that $25,000 has been in effect?
Oh gosh, as long as I can remember, and I'm approaching 19 years with the agency myself. So it's probably time for an overhaul, huh? With
Yeah,
inflation.
that was the next question, is if there was any prospects for increasing the amount.
I don't, we've had enough change. I'll put that question in for consideration next year. Great question though.
A question.
Sure.
Scenario, a Boeing 737 goes into the water off of Indonesia. What is the NTSB's remit in an overseas incident or crash?
That is a great question. So for many of you, you're probably familiar in your aviation musings of ICAO, or the International Civil Aviation Organization. And we have Annex 13. And so what Annex 13 does is afford the state of manufacture, the state of operation, the possibility to participate in that accident investigation. And so off the coast of Indonesia, the Indonesian government would likely have jurisdiction over that investigation. And they could say, oh, yep, this is our investigation and we're going to conduct that investigation. NTSB, we invite you to participate in our investigation. We would like you to appoint an accredited representative. So an accredited representative is an NTSB investigator, and they may travel to the country of occurrence. They may provide support on scene for that investigation. And we liaise similar to the party system. And again, I'll get into this in here in just a few minutes, but we'll liaise with who we call technical liaisons. And so that would be Boeing as the manufacturer, whoever the engine manufacturer was. Let's say that it was United Airlines that operated. So we would have technical liaisons through United Airlines to provide the technical aspect or information that the Indonesian government would need to successfully conduct that investigation.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, so I think we've hit these definitions. I think I went backwards. So definitions, any other questions about definitions? We're going to take a quiz real quick here. And this will be fun, I promise. Is this an incident or an accident?
I thought that's where baby airplanes came from.
It is where baby airplanes come from.
I say it's an accident.
Absolutely.
25K to fix that.
Okay, so we got to vote for an accident. Any votes for incidents?
That's an accident.
Definitely an accident. Why is it an accident? It has nothing to do with the contents of the shorts of either of the pilots. Nobody was injured.
Substantial damage.
Substantial damage, absolutely. Substantial damage where?
I'd say control surfaces of the airplane.
Yep. So the wings of that Stinson there on the bottom, I don't think they're too happy. Definitely substantial damage to the wing spars and the ribs of that lower airplane. I'm not aware of anything that was substantial to the Piper Cherokee on top there, but definitely an interesting yet fortunate day for everybody involved. So my understanding is the story goes, we can look up the NTSB report later, but as the story goes, the one airplane was in the traffic pattern doing touch and goes, and the Cherokee came in and descended on top of the Stinson, and the Stinson kept that in power, and he couldn't figure out why he couldn't climb out, and the Cherokee couldn't figure out why he wasn't descending properly. And it wasn't until the Stinson came all the way down that they figured out they had collided in the air. So again, very, very, very fortunate day for everybody involved, because it certainly could have had a tragic outcome. Okay, quiz 2. Where did this happen, Colorado pilots? This is not a doctored position, by the way. This airplane actually came to us in this tree, minor injuries, and those signs were not photoshopped in though. Those signs were actually there. So this was taken in at Meadow Lake Airport, just east of Colorado Springs. So do we have an accident here?
That's an incident.
An incident.
Very substantial damage there.
Okay, so we've got a difference here. We got one vote for very substantial damage and one vote for incident. So why an incident?
I was saying that because it didn't occur with another aircraft, but
Good. So it doesn't matter if another airplane has been involved. Single airplanes can certainly be involved in accidents. So this guy was doing touch and goes at Meadow Lake and lost engine power and decided to put it in the tree. I'm kidding. I don't think anybody decides to put the airplane in the tree, but definitely substantial damage. And we figured as best as we could, it was likely due to carburetor icing for this particular accident. So you all know about carburetor icing and how it can eat your lunch if you're not flying fuel injected. Accident or incident?
Incident.
Okay, we've got to vote for an incident. Vote for accident.
I would go with the accident. I think that's going to cost a lot to fix.
Absolutely. And remember, we're not so much worried about the dollar amount. We're worried about structural strength, performance, and flight characteristics of the airplane that will require major repair. And so the wing in this particular airplane is bent up, which means spar damage, which means rib damage, which means major repair. So definitely an accident for this one. So I'll tell you the story. Brand new surface runway in Utah. And this happened, probably 18 years ago. And so the pilot was coming in to land on this newly surfaced runway. It was a really hot day. And the surface on the new runway was just a little bit too much for this pilot. He lost directional control during the landing, came up and dipped it on that wing. And the rest was unfortunately history. Last quiz question here. Accident or incident?
accident.
Okay, we got accident votes.
Another
Any
road
vote?
accident.
Okay. Why is this an accident?
Well, it looks like the elevator's pretty much ripped off the airplane.
Structural damage.
What about the dead bird?
Is that what that is? I thought that was an arm, eh? The elevator.
Oh, yeah, that's a bird. Huh.
So do we care about the death of birds when we classify it as an accident?
No, but
No,
it's substantial damage anyway.
it's substantial damage anyway, but if the only fatality was a bird or a dog or a deer and there was otherwise no damage associated, we would not classify it as an accident just based on the injury or death of wildlife. Unfortunate. I'm sure that the Canada geese have issue with that, but they can take that up with their congressman.
That was one tough bird, I'll say.
Indeed, indeed. All right, so incident, we covered this just briefly, that any other event other than an accident due to the operation of the airplane and may have an effect on safe operation. So again, we don't do incident investigations all of the time, just when the circumstances garner that, yes, this is definitely something that we need to look into a little bit further. Okay, moving on to investigation categories. Any other questions before we change topics? Okay, not seeing anything. So we have different levels and different types of investigations that we do. We have limited investigations. Those are fender benders where we don't see serious injury or death. The pilot's still there to talk to us and tell us kind of what happened. We're not going to launch on those immediately. We have field investigation where there's either a high profile type of accident that's garnering a lot of attention or somebody has lost their life. We're going to launch on those as quickly as we can. Major investigations involve high profile situations with a major loss of life, but not always a major loss of life. Sometimes emerging technologies. So if we had a Spaceship One type of accident where there was no loss of life, but they did crash outside of their containment area, we would definitely send a major investigation team to do those. Within these LA, FA, MA, and IA categories, we have different levels of classification. One being the highest level of an accident garnering the greatest number of resources as quickly as possible, and a level 4 investigation, which would generally be an L4 or a limited 4 investigation, which is a known circumstances accident, pilot confessional, if you will, where the pilot says, yep, I just screwed up. The wind was a little bit more than I was ready for, and that's why I had this accident. So we're not going to put a lot of time or resource into that investigation because by and large, we know what happened for that accident. So again, with limited investigations, the Ntsb does not travel initially on those investigations. We're going to garner a lot of our support from the FAA, and this may be what some people refer to as deputizing. It's not a formal deputizing, but the FAA is our eyes and our ears on these types of investigations so that we can understand preliminarily what's going on with this particular event. We may oftentimes receive support from airframe or engine manufacturers in these types of accidents. For field investigations, this is, again, most likely we've had a loss of life or it's a very high profile type of an accident. We're going to receive support from the FAA, airframe, engine manufacturers, and oftentimes operators. This is where we might see a 135 operator or a 121 operator. With these field investigations, fatal accidents, again, so most likely at least one loss of life, high profile, non-fatal accidents. So this is the accident that happens in downtown Denver where we might have serious injuries with a helicopter accident, an EMS type of accident, but not necessarily a loss of life. And then non-fatal accidents involving the airlines, such as we saw down in Texas just a few months ago. Major investigations most likely involve air carrier or high profile accidents. And this is not necessarily an accident that would be supported by my team here in the central region, but rather the Ntsb GO team that launches out of Washington, DC. A field investigation can take 3 to 5 days on scene, whereas a major investigation can sometimes take 1 to 2 weeks for the on-scene portion of the investigation. They're supported by a different level of FAA support, but they also receive the same support from FAA airframe engine manufacturers and then operators of that particular airplane. With major investigations, they garner a lot of attention. There's a lot of discussion of these types of accidents in the media, and oftentimes they result in public hearings and then public board meetings. A public hearing is where the Ntsb takes all of the information that they've discovered during the course of the investigation, and they ask official under testimony type questions to different industry stakeholders in a public hearing forum. So basically on the record and under oath. A public board meeting is where the NTSB investigators take all of the facts and circumstances that they've established during the course of the investigation. They present these facts and circumstances to the board members in a sunshine meeting or a public forum. And then the board members deliberate on the analysis and vote on what the most probable cause of that particular accident is. Incident investigations, as I stated earlier, is not an accident. And we investigate these where we feel that we're seeing a trend, something within aviation safety where it hasn't yet resulted in an accident, but has the potential to result in more accidents or the possibility of major loss of life. And consistent with the accident investigations, we do receive support from the FAA and the various manufacturers during the course of those incident investigations. As I stated previously, we scale these investigations. So if there's no safety payback, nothing that we're going to garner from this investigation, risk versus reward, this is going to be a level 4 investigation where we have a paragraph, a statement from the pilot, document the substantial damage, and that will be the extent of our investigation. Whereas the highest level would be a level 1 investigation where we have multiple safety issues. We have numerous SMEs or subject matter experts that support that investigation. And that type of investigation is going to go to a full board meeting with the board members. So I'm going to jump into investigative process here in a minute, but I do see 2 questions here that I want to hit on. Can we divert to the NTSB publication of defining events? What is the ratio of power plant malfunction to the total number of engine failures, accidents, no foul? Can you elaborate a little bit on that? I'm not sure what you mean by accidents, incidents, no foul. Okay, I'm not hearing anything. I can say that I don't have the numbers here at my fingertips, but I'll be more than happy to provide the data point, if you will, of out of all of the investigations that we do, how many are related to the loss of engine power, and of those loss of engine power, what smaller buckets we might be able to put those into. So would that be a mechanical failure of the engine? Would that be fuel contamination problem? I think that one of the more common accidents that we see with loss of engine power accidents is when the fuel is contaminated with air, meaning there's not enough fuel in the fuel tanks to operate that engine successfully. So again, I apologize, I can't provide that exact number off the top of my head, but I can give that to Mike so that he can share that with you at a later time, if that's okay. Okay, I see. Let's see. Is there a standing requirement that manufacturers have to cooperate, or does it require a warrant of some kind? So, no, we have the party system process, and as we discuss the investigation process, I'll get into the parties. But parties, party members are defined by Part 830. They are an entity that bring technical expertise to the investigation. So not just anybody can be a party to an NTSB investigation. You have to show the investigator in charge that you bring something specific, applicable to that accident investigation. So if we have a loss of engine power involving a Lycoming engine, Lycoming Manufacturing has a group of 3 or 4 people who support all of the investigations that we do throughout the country. And so if we have a loss of engine power, I've got a rod hanging out of the case. I'm going to call Lycoming. I'm going to say, here are the circumstances. Would you like to participate? And if they would like to participate, then they sign a party statement that basically says, I'm not going to use this in a court of law. I'm not going to use this to support litigation. I'm not going to use this information to defend my company. I'm here to solely provide you with the technical expertise and knowledge and the tools that you need to tear this engine down and determine why did this rod fail or why did this engine fail. So we don't force manufacturers to participate. We don't require a warrant for them to participate, but it's in their own best interest to participate in this investigation, because by doing so, they have access to investigative information. And if we do have a manufacturing defect or manufacturing problem, they have that information up front. They can work with the FAA, owners, operators to impact change. Start on that airworthiness directive, start on that service bulletin, make sure that there aren't any others out there flying around that are going to potentially see a same or similar failure. So we can't compel them to participate, but it's certainly in everybody's best interest when they do so. And then let's see, accident or incident, and will there be an investigation into Mr. I'm flying my airplane along and oh no, the engine quit and now I'm going to jump out. Yes, that is an accident. I know there is a lot of discussion and speculation out there within the aviation industry as to what's going on with this. And so the Ntsb will do due diligence. We will do our job. We will take the information that has been provided for us, and we will present a factual report. The board will review that factual information, and they will do an analysis and determine the most probable cause for that investigation. These investigations are very, very difficult. And I will tell you, sometimes the jury of public opinion is stronger than the Ntsb's determination in some of these investigations. So that investigation is being handled by the Western Region Agency. All right, so I see the clarification on the previous question. So no foul means either accident, not an accident, nor an incident. So if it's not an accident, we don't categorize it. So it's difficult for me to take that and say that if we haven't classified it as an accident, we're not going to track that kind of information and quantify, okay, we've had this many engine failures and of this many engine failures, this many resulted in particular accidents. I do believe the FAA keeps track of some of that data, so you might be able to refer to the FAA for that. But again, I can provide my afterwards just a data point of how many of all of the accidents we do. This bucket is loss of engine power, this bucket is due to mechanical, this bucket is due to fuel exhaustion, starvation, so on and so forth. Any other questions? These are great questions. Maybe next time I'll just log in and answer questions, Mike. I don't need a presentation. Okay, not seeing any more, so I'm going to continue on here. So we have a comm center in Washington, D.C., and this is the source for many of the notifications that we receive when there's been an accident. Sometimes they come through the FAA Communications Center. Sometimes they come through our communications center in Washington, D.C. So this number at the top of the screen here, if you're involved in an accident and you're in a condition to do so, please do feel free to call us 24/7, 365. Somebody is always there to answer the phone, and somebody is always there to talk to you. You can go to our website and find that same accident number. You can go to our website and report as a witness, and you can go to our website and find our accident report form that would be required if you were involved in an accident. So after the initial notification, whether it be through the FAA or the Ntsb, the accident is triaged and then it's assigned to the appropriate region. If it's a limited investigation, we're going to work with the FAA inspector who is local. Remember, there's thousands of FAA inspectors and just 45 of me. So we definitely use the FAA a lot for our eyes and ears. They're going to be our eyes and ears initially on scene for these limited investigations. We're going to want to understand what our hazards are before we head out to this accident. The hazards that we can be associated with following an accident are very diverse. We've had accidents where there's been fentanyl on board, and you guys have all seen in the media recently the dangers of fentanyl. So we have to be concerned about what they might have been transporting for that accident, what wildlife is in the area, and what condition is the wreckage. If it's a cirrus, for example, and that cirrus has burned, the carbon fibers that are in the air can be very hazardous to the investigator. So we need to be aware of what type of airframe it was, what condition is it in, where is it, in order to best protect ourselves while we're conducting that particular investigation. We're going to communicate with local law enforcement. Local law enforcement is going to hold jurisdiction of that accident until we arrive on scene or the FAA arrives on scene and is acting basically in our behalf to document different aspects of that accident. Local law enforcement will be responsible for taking care of autopsy. The FAA is responsible for toxicologies. We provide a box to collect specimens to whoever the pro-sector or local coroner is. They will collect those samples and then they're sent to a lab in Oklahoma City where the FAA conducts all of those toxicologies. The local law enforcement will help us preserve the wreckage, make sure that it's not going anywhere, basically treating everything like a crime scene until Ntsb and FAA are able to arrive on scene. We're going to make sure the victims are removed. People who have survived are taken to local hospitals, receive the care that they need. We do not release any public information when we're doing these investigations. We don't release the names of the pilots. We don't release the names of the passengers who are on board. So that information should all come from local law enforcement once the necessary notification of kin has taken place. We do take care of media inquiries. Sometimes you'll see following an accident, the Ntsb will conduct media briefings once or twice during the course of their on-scene work. And then again, I mentioned earlier, one of our pillars of responsibility is to take care of those families. And so we will have a representative with our TDA or Transportation Disaster Assistance Office liaising with the families of those that were involved to make sure that they receive the first up-to-date information, if you will, throughout the course of the investigation. They don't have to learn about the investigation through the media, if you will. While we're on scene, we're going to be doing a ton of different activities. We're going to be taking pictures, drawing pictures. So this is where kindergarten came in important, in that you can use your crayons and your colored pencils to draw a picture of what happened on scene. And I say that lightheartedly, but accident diagrams and understanding where the different parts and components came apart and which tree did they hit and which tree they didn't hit are absolutely critical and important for understanding the crash dynamics, especially when you don't have any sort of recorders involved. We're going to be conducting interviews with anybody who witnessed the accident, whether that be pilots or passengers on board or anybody who might have been outside and observed the actual aircraft accident. Securing the different records that are associated with the operation of that airplane. We're going to examine the airframe while it's on scene, and then we're going to secure it and we're going to move it to a secure facility where we're going to continue to do work. We want to do the examination in both stages because once you move that wreckage, you're losing a lot of information and you're losing a lot of evidence. So you examine it once, you document it once, and then you move it somewhere else so that you can do the more detailed fidelity type investigation when that's necessary. If we have a component that has failed, we do have a laboratory in Washington, D.C., where we can send that piece off for different testing to understand its failure mode, whether the material was the correct material to begin with. We also have a ton of subject matter experts in Washington, D.C. that can launch with us on an accident or help us kind of behind the scenes while we're doing the on-scene portion of the investigation to do the investigation into air traffic control. What was the weather doing? Who was operating the airplane and were they operating the airplane properly and correctly? We do have a recorders lab. I'm sure that you guys are all familiar with the black box, but did you know that the black box is not actually black, but rather blaze orange. So the black box or the flight data recorders, the cockpit voice recorders are just one recorder or resource that we have to conduct our investigations. We also have the benefit of the handheld GPS unit. So if you guys have a handheld GPS unit, it's on during the accident sequence. We have the ability to download the information from that GPS and use that through the course of our investigation. Avidyne avionics. Many of the airplanes have the more up-to-date glass cockpit, if you will, the PFD, the MFDs. Those all have the ability to record and store information during the course of the flight. And so we can send these units to our lab in Washington, D.C., and they figured out how to get this information out. And in some cases, it's just as good as, if not better, than the information that we might glean from a cockpit voice recorder or a flight data recorder. So if you do have one of these installed on your airplanes, we always tell everybody, don't try to download anything from these units. Please leave that to the investigators to take care of if it's deemed necessary. And then again, I talked about this previously, but let's get into it a little bit more here. This is our party system. And so this is how me as a flight instructor and a commercial pilot, I can't know everything. I can't be intimate and familiar with every single airframe that's possibly out there or every single engine that's possibly out there. And so this is where through Part 830 that we invite other entities to participate in our investigations. And again, they have to be able to show that they bring expertise that we cannot get from any other source. And they have to agree that during the course of their participation for this investigation, they're not going to share their findings, their pictures, their information with anybody that's external to that investigation. The only time that we would grant an exception to that is when we have a safety of flight issue and we need them to share that information immediately and quickly with their companies so that they can affect change and issue airworthiness directives along with the FAA to prevent future similar accidents from taking place. Only the Ntsb can designate party members. This is something that the IIC or the investigator-in-charge decides to do. This is not something that is politically influenced or legally influenced. So just because somebody wants to be a party to an investigation does not mean that they're automatically involved in that investigation. And then as previously asked, if there is a foreign aspect to this investigation, it's a two-way street. You know, we have foreign operators here, we have foreign manufacturers here. So if it was an Airbus 350 B3E helicopter, we would afford the French government the opportunity to participate in our investigation, and they would have the technical liaison of Airbus helicopters to assist them, Safran engines, to assist them during the course of that investigation. So before I move on to the last little part of my presentation here, any other questions about our process? Mike?
This Mike, when you talked about environmental, I'm sure if it was a cargo plane, you would get the manifest from the airline so you would know what cargo you're dealing with. But as far as a commercial flight goes, you don't know what's in people's luggage. So
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we have to be careful. Anytime we go into a scene, we have different levels of PPE or personal protective equipment that we will don. And then in the age of COVID, it adds an additional level of complexity to the investigation. So you never know what kind of infections or disease the pilot might have had. And so biohazard is always a concern. What do the people have in their luggage? I did an accident, it's probably been 8 years ago now, but the airplane encountered a level 5 thunderstorm, and the pilot stalled the airplane for obvious reasons and entered a flat spin and just came out of the sky flat as a pancake. And I was looking at the luggage that was stuck in the back of the airplane because I found it curious that he was in a flat spin. So, you know, my focus at that point is what's where, can I do a weight and balance, understand what the CG was. And I'm pulling out this black bag. It's a black huge garbage bag on the back of the airplane. And inside of this black bag was the carcass of 3 different fox. So you never know what people are going to be carrying on board their airplane. And I was grateful that they were in a black bag and obviously in the airplane, and I didn't have to decide, okay, did they crash land on top of a fox den during the course of this accident. And so yeah, absolutely, you never know what's inside of people's luggage.
And as far as the black boxes go, don't they have they give out sonar, or they give out a sound or a ping or something for X amount of hours?
Absolutely. So when the black box is immersed in water, it has a sensor that sets off a pinger. And so if the unit has been properly maintained and serviced, then that pinger battery will activate for up to 30 days to help us locate it when it's submerged in water. Excellent. Any other questions?
Yes, another black box question. Again, Indonesia, the crash and the black boxes are recovered by the Indonesians. What is their responsibility to decode that information? And I'm sure you're running into quite a variety, a spectrum of ability to handle without damaging the data from country to country.
Absolutely.
How is that handled?
So if the investigative country does not have the ability to download those units, the Ntsb, the BEA of France, the AAIB in the United Kingdom all have the abilities to download these units and do so willingly without any issues at all. And so I don't remember exactly in Indonesia, but I want to say that it did either come to the United States or France for assistance in downloading that particular flight data recorder, cockpit voice recorder. So it's common for other investigative authorities to reach out to the Ntsb and have our lab assist not only with downloading recorders associated with the accident, but also in assisting in the metallurgical aspect of investigations. If their lab does not have the ability to support different levels of examination, our lab assists on a regular basis other countries in those examinations. The extreme would be a country that does not have an investigative authority. And so it's rare, but that would be a handshake between the State Department, the Ntsb, and the foreign country to say, hey, we've had this accident. We don't have the expertise to conduct an investigation. Ntsb, will you please help us with this investigation? And we've done so on several occasions.
Related question, was there any Ntsb involvement in the Cal 7 crash? It was caused by a Russian shoot down.
Yes, we did send an investigator to initially liaise with that investigation with the airframe manufacturers, if I recall correctly. But that is the limit of our involvement for that particular investigation. And that's where both internally for accidents that happen in the United States and then externally, we draw the line. We are interested in accidents and not acts of war or terrorism. And so if we determine through the course of our investigation that the act was intentional, then that jurisdiction shifts to the FBI, and the FBI is responsible for that investigation. I want to say the most high profile situation in recent memory is TWA 800, which happened back in the early 1990s, where that was a joint jurisdiction investigation for a very long time because half of the people felt that it was a missile that brought down the airplane and others felt that it was truly an accident. So it does happen.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, Mike, I've exceeded my 45 minutes. I think I'm at an hour and 15 minutes. So am I still good to go?
Yes, please.
Okay, excellent. So we'll hit pillars of responsibility, and then I have a little bit of a case study to share with you guys with a bit of a safety message. So I touched on this at the beginning, but it bears repeating. The NTSB has 3 pillars of responsibility when we do our accident investigations. The first is to determine the facts and circumstances surrounding the accident. Next, establish the most probable cause of that accident. And then finally, prevent future similar accidents from happening. So the facts and circumstances, let's talk about that for a minute. A fact is something that is observable and that you can see, whereas analysis and our probable cause is deduction, if you will, or the process that Sherlock Holmes goes through when he looks at facts. So the example that I like to use is an airplane hitting a tree. And so if you looked at the leading edge of the right wing, you would observe a circular indentation in that wing that measured approximately 15 inches in diameter. And the leading edge of that wing contained wood material that was consistent with bark. And so those are all facts of that particular accident. Analysis would be the airplane hit the tree. Analysis would also be that the tree hit the airplane. So the facts are the observations that you glean from the accident site, the witnesses, the witness observations, the records that you review. Analysis is taking those facts and trying to figure out what happened. So again, one analysis would be that the airplane hit the tree. The other analysis would be the tree hit the airplane. So which one is more reasonable? And you know, I'm not going to get into statistics because that's where I almost didn't graduate. Is, you know, type 1 and type 2 analysis, and type 1 and type 2 failures when you're analyzing that data and making the determination and determining what the most probable cause is. And so I like to talk about the most probable cause. This is most probably what happened based on the information that we have available to us during the course of that investigation. Our investigations are never closed. And so if in 10 years somebody brings forward information that is new to that investigation, was not previously shared, we will introduce that information to the investigation, and we may alter our analysis and our probable cause based on that new information. So we take the analysis, we take the facts, we determine what we think most probably happened based on this information, and then we try to prevent future similar accidents. And we do that through various different means. We sit down and we have honest conversations with awesome pilots like you guys, plant the seed and say, hey, this is what happened to this poor pilot. So next time you go flying, think twice about this situation before you take off. We have safety recommendations. Safety recommendations are a more formal process where we take the information from an accident, and this is approved by our 5-member board. So it's the strongest, somewhat political stance that we can take on aviation safety. Our board members have a most wanted list. So not unlike the FBI has their most wanted list of criminals that they want to capture. The NTSB has their most wanted list of common aviation or transportation themes that we see where we would like to please put Jennifer out of a job so she can hang out and build Legos all day with her son type of situation. So stop using medications that are not approved for flight. Make sure that you're well rested before you go flying. Make sure that you have enough fuel for your flight before you go flying. So we also do safety studies and safety alerts where we take different accidents that have common themes and we bring them together to build a stronger case for a certain topic. So on our training center is a plaque that reads, from tragedy, we draw knowledge to improve safety of us all. So again, that's our goal. the paycheck is nice, but at the end of the day, my goal is to make sure that when you get in your airplane, you know that if it was maintained properly, that it's going to perform as you expect it to perform, and it's going to be consistent. So with that, I'm going to jump into a case study here real quick, and then let's see, Kent, I see you have a question here. If you have time after your presentation, do you have any advice for older private pilots? Yes, I'll jump into that in just a second. So let me knock out this case study real quick, and then I'll talk about older pilots. And we'll have to quantify what older is, because I don't want to insult anybody. My husband turns 50 on Sunday, and he's not happy about it. So, okay, so Kilgore, Texas. You guys are junior investigators now. I'm deputizing you for the purpose of this presentation. So you're going to help me through this investigation. So here's what we know. This happened January 12th in Kilgore, Texas. It involved a Probst Baby Ace. So it's a high wing, single engine airplane, one person on board, and this person was fatally injured. Okay, so this is the accident scene. So I want you to take a really close look at this picture. And what do you see? I don't respond. Just take a really close look at this picture. Don't focus just on the airplane. Look at the surroundings. Where is the airplane? How is the airplane situated? Look at the propeller. The propeller tells us a lot. It's like a black magic. Reading a propeller and figuring out what the engine was doing based on the signatures that we do or do not see on that propeller. So definitely an accident. Unfortunately, somebody died in this accident. And that's something that we're going to focus on a little bit more here in a minute. But at first glance, I don't understand why somebody died in this accident. Okay, I'm going to show you another angle. So other side of the wing, definitely an accident because we've got substantial damage. Somebody died. We've got substantial damage to the empennage, substantial damage to the right wing, possibly some fuselage damage. That one blade is pretty straight on that prop. Okay, so we're going to do an engine examination. We're going to do an airframing examination. And we're going to determine that there's nothing mechanically wrong with this airplane or with this engine. We're going to determine that the fuel tanks were intact. They were not breached. And there's absolutely no evidence of fuel within the fuel system or the fuel tanks. And there's evidence of a wire strike. Did you all catch that? Did you see that in the picture? So up here at the top, directly above the airplane, are power lines that the airplane likely hit. And I can't remember exactly where the damage was on the airplane, but there was you get electrical arcing and you get some clear cuts when an airplane says hello to some power lines. Okay. Okay, so we have nothing mechanically wrong, no fuel in the fuel tanks, and evidence of a wire strike. Yep, Mike, you got it. You're tracking. You're with me. Okay, so there was a GPS on board, and I sent the GPS to the lab, and the lab was able to extract some data, and we could see that this pilot is circling over this area and going this direction, and then turning around and coming this direction, and then turning around and going in this direction. And he did this 10 times. What does that tell you? What is the pilot doing?
He's looking at something,
He's looking at something, or he's looking for something.
looking at the ground, trying to not paying attention or I don't know, I wasn't there. But there's a body of water there. It looks like a construction site. But if
Absolutely.
he's going round and round, that means he's circling and looking at something, I would think.
Yep. So it's speculation to try to figure out what the pilot was doing, because like Mike said, we weren't there. We weren't there with the pilot. So we'd want to talk to friends and family and what was the pilot doing? Well, the pilot was flying from point A to point B. And did he get lost? Was he circling around trying to find something? Or was he taking pictures? Was he looking at a construction site? So all possibilities. But he lost track of something very significant for this particular airplane. The airplane was located about 20 miles south of his intended fuel stop. So whether he got lost and couldn't figure out where the local airport was, where he was going to get fuel, whether he was tracking something on the ground, was he taking pictures, he lost situational awareness. This is inside of the airplane. Does anybody know what we're looking at very quaintly packed in this seat pack that is directly behind the pilot's seat?
Looks like a scarf.
Yep, we got a scarf, we got seat belts, shoulder harnesses.
Oh.
So the pilot was not wearing his shoulder harnesses. The shoulder harnesses were beautifully stowed in this pack in the back of the airplane at the time of the accident. It's very embarrassing to run out of gas. I call it fuel contamination. The fuel was contaminated with air. This accident did not need to be fatal. The pilots, most likely, the engine lost power due to fuel exhaustion. There was absolutely no fuel found in the system. During the emergency descent, the airplane struck power lines and came to rest inverted, like you saw. Because the pilot was not wearing his shoulder harnesses, he slipped out of his lap belt and his head hit the top of the airplane, and it resulted in what we call an Atlantic-occipital separation, or a broken neck, which is in most cases instantly fatal.
Yeah.
So my plea to you is to continue to put me out of a job. Wear your seatbelts, wear your shoulder harnesses, and please make sure that you have enough fuel to safely complete your flight.
From the way the propeller is, it looked like when he hit the power lines, the propeller was not moving because that one blade is buried right in the ground.
Yep,
So
this blade right here is buried. This one is straight as a board.
Yeah.
And usually during the impact sequence with the ground, you'll have prop strikes in the ground as that propeller continues to windmill or produce power. And it'll kind of pull that airplane along for a little bit. And that blade will twist. You'll have leading edge gouges and scratches on that blade. And sometimes the blade will completely obliterate itself. If it's creating power, that blade is going to separate right here at the hub.
Yeah. In that second picture, you can really see it in the ground.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible.
Excellent. So with that, I am going to go quickly here. Here's my business card, digital business card. Mike, I can provide this presentation to you if this is beneficial to you and your team here.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you.
But it has been an absolute pleasure. I'm going to stop sharing here. You guys have been a wonderful audience, and I'm going to try to answer this question that Kent asked. So older private pilots, like some of you who have attended, I don't see any older private pilots in this audience. So, well, you'll have to define for me what an older private pilot is. So we'll say
we're old, but we're good looking.
That's right. That's right. That's all that's important. Old and good looking. There's old pilots and there's bold pilots, but there are no old bold pilots.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to say we don't capture age specific data all of the time. We ask pilots how old they are. We calculate how old they are. when they're involved in an accident. But I can't say that we see a trend that is specific to older pilots. Older pilots run out of gas just as much as younger pilots do. Older pilots get lost in the mountains just as much as younger pilots do. Older pilots don't maintain control of the airplane during an emergency just as much as younger pilots don't maintain control. What we do see is a trend with the use of medications, and I can send this to you, Mike. This has been one of our most wanted list items for a very long time, is the use of medications that are contraindicating or not approved for safe flight. So understanding what Sudafed does to you, is Sudafed safe for flying? It's okay to take certain blood pressure medications. It's okay to take certain medications that you might see within an aging population, but work with your medical officer to make sure that you understand what those effects are. Are they safe for flight? Or is this something where you need to take a deep breath and decide, okay, maybe I shouldn't be flying by myself, but take a buddy along who can fly with me. So I can share that specific information, looking for medications. And then fatigue. We see a lot of accidents, not just with older pilots, but across the board with fatigue, where pilots are tired. They've been flying all day. They've been flying in turbulence, and it gets the best of them. And when they're faced with an emergency, because they're fatigued, because they might be under the influence of a medication they shouldn't be flying with, all of those holes line up, if you will, and it results in that accident. So I can send that literature out to you, Mike, and you can share that with the team. If you guys have any other questions, just send me an email, give me a call, and I will answer your question as quickly as I can. And if I can't answer it, I'll make something up.
Okay, that'd be great, Jennifer. Thank you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot tonight, that's for sure. I'm still taken aback of only 120 people for the whole United States, Alaska, and Hawaii. That's
that
amazing.
Includes the admins, that's supervisors, that's SMEs, that's everybody.
That's
What's
incredible.
that shop?
That's incredible. I know I was telling Sean, I was watching the Alaska aircraft investigation show that used to be on around 2016, 2017. I used to watch that religiously. It was only one season. And then also on the Smithsonian, they do the air disaster, the show. And I try to watch that as much as I can as well. But I just one question on your reports, the Ntsb reports. Your PowerPoint presentation said that they were available at a reasonable cost, but I thought there was a database on
They're free now. Absolutely.
Okay.
So everything is digital. You can just, you go in there and you look for the accident that you're looking for. And when you find it, it'll provide a link for the report. It'll show you the stage of the report. So is that the final report? Is that just the factual report? And then it'll provide you a link for the public docket. And we took everything digital a couple of years ago. We're still working on bringing up those accidents from 1965 and 1970. Right. Those aren't quite digitized yet, but we're working on it. Right. So yeah, one-stop shopping, you can click on it. If it's not there, then you can send an email to our FOIA office and our team will harvest that investigation resource and they'll email it to you.
Okay. Just one, shoot, I just had it in my, I know what it was. Is there a time frame from the time the accident happens to when the report has to be finished, or it's done when it's done?
Unfortunately, it's done when it's done. And that's the downside of there only being 45 of us right now in the regions to do that, is the accidents don't stop. And we've had some attrition over the last 2 years because of COVID, because of retirements. People have decided that it's time to do something else for a while, and we haven't been able to fill those positions as quickly as we like. So we are down 15 investigators right now. So it takes us longer to do the job than we would like. Right.
You see the safety analysts on the television, talking about what they think happened. And I always tell people that are around me, you're not going to know what happened at least for a year. Give it a year, then you get the full report. But to the day of or a couple of days after to speculate what we think happened, I just think it's a big disservice to the American people.
It is, and it's especially to the families to
Yeah.
say, oh, I think this is what happened when the circumstances haven't been fully vetted. And unfortunately, it creates a lot of red herrings that we feel obligated to address directly or indirectly just to quell rumor and get rid of those red herrings, if you will. But we are hiring, so if any of y'all want a job, go to USA Jobs, search for Ntsb. I think the application process ends at the end of the week, so I'd love to have you guys.
Okay. Any other questions out there, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen? Oh, okay. Well, Jennifer, it's been great. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You guys stay safe and healthy.
Thanks.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye, everybody. Good night. Thank you very much.
Good night.